Looking for magic cards? At flipsidegaming.com you can now use the promo code LVD to get a 10% discount on orders over $10 while supporting the channel at the same time. Hello and welcome to another episode of Friendly Friday, a weekly series where we take a look at budget, standard or modern decks, and this week we're taking a look at Red-Green Pummeler in Standard, an energy-based aggro combo deck built around Electrostatic Pummeler. The deck hasn't changed much since its release in Kaladesh, but we'll go over the entire deck nonetheless. So Electrostatic Pummeler is a 3 mana 1/1. When it enters the battlefield you get 3 energy, and you can pay 3 energy at any point to give the Pummeler +X until end of turn, where X is its power. So you can figure out that combining pump spells with Electrostatic Pummeler's ability is quite powerful, since if you use the pump spell before using the Pummeler's ability, you can make the Pummeler pretty large and deal a lot of damage out of nowhere, especially if you have a lot of energy stocked up. So let's take a look at the rest of the deck. We've got in the 1-drop slot 4 copies of Blossoming Defense, which is a nice 1 mana pump spell giving +2/+2 and hexproof until end of turn. So this is a nice way to protect our Pummeler from removal spells, or just to go for the kill by adding 2 additional power to the Pummeler. We also have 4 copies of Aether Chaser, a 2 mana 2/1 with First Strike. When it enters the battlefield you get 2 energy, and when the Aether Chaser attacks you can also spend 2 energy if you want to make a 1/1 colorless servo artifact creature token. So usually you're gonna hold on to the 2 energy to maybe use it in combination with Electrostatic Pummeler or Bristling Hydra, but if you're out of options you can always start making some 1/1s to attack with. So Aether Chaser basically fills the role of a 2 mana 2-drop that makes some energy, which is important for the deck to function. You need a critical mass of energy producers, and with the banning of Attune with Aether, the deck needs more energy producers to make sure you have enough energy to go off with the Pummeler or Hydra. Next up we have 2 copies of Fling, which is an interesting card that can lead to surprise victories out of nowhere. A 2 mana instant that requires us to sacrifice a creature as an additional cost, and when we do we get to deal damage equal to the sacrificed creature's power to any target. So after having attacked with a giant Pummeler or Hydra, we can sacrifice them to maybe finish off an opponent. We can also use Fling in combination with Electrostatic Pummeler without attacking. Let's say the opponent has lots of blockers out and there's no way you can connect with the Pummeler. You can still maybe play the Pummeler, and then in the same turn use a bunch of pump spells, use the Pummeler's ability to make him giant, and then use Fling in the same turn to kill an opponent out of nowhere when they weren't expecting you to be able to kill them. And next up we have another important pump spell in the deck, Invigorated Rampage, giving target creature +4/+0 and trample until end of turn, or we can split it up and give +2/+0 to 2 target creatures, and they also gain trample. Being able to give our Electrostatic Pummeler +4 power and trample means we can kill the opponent out of nowhere if we just have a little bit of energy left over. Next up we have 4 copies of Longtusk Cub, which can function as an additional win condition if we don't have the Electrostatic Pummeler or Hydra, since it's a 2 mana 2/2 that whenever it deals damage to a player we get to add 2 energy, and we can pay 2 energy at any point to put a +1/+1 counter on the Longtusk Cub. So if the Longtusk Cub can keep connecting with the opponent, we can keep generating energy, keep growing the Cub, which makes it again easier to keep attacking. So it's kind of an engine that fuels itself, can maybe provide energy if we have a Pummeler, and can also be used as an additional win condition if the opponent can answer the Pummeler. Then we have 2 copies of Resilient Khenra, a 2 mana 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, target creature gets +X until end of turn, where X is the Resilient Khenra's power, and the Khenra also has Eternal Eyes for 6 mana, so we can get it back from the graveyard as a 4/4 zombie with the same ability. So instead of giving +2/+2, it will be giving +4/+4 when we Eternalize it, which of course also combines nicely with the Pummeler. Next up we have 4 copies of Servant of the Conduit, a 2 mana 2/2 that gains 2 energy when she enters the battlefield, and we can also use her as a mana creature by spending an energy, so she can help us cast a turn 3 Bristling Hydra, which can be very powerful, and otherwise it's just a 2 mana 2/2 that gains 2 energy, which is almost good enough in this deck. And then our final 2-drop is Voltaic Brawler, a 2 mana 3/2 that gains 2 energy when he enters the battlefield, and when the Brawler attacks we can spend an energy to give the Brawler +1/+1 and trample until end of turn. So another nice energy beatdown creature. Then of course we have our 4 copies of Electrostatic Pummeler, and then 1 copy of Rhonas the Indomitable, which can function as an additional pump spell, since for 3 mana we can give target creature +2/+0 until end of turn, And of course, Rhonas itself can also be used as a threat as a 3-mana 5/5 with Death Touch and Indestructible, but he can only attack and block if we have a creature with power 4 or greater, but of course his activated ability helps there as well. And Rhonas combines very nicely with Bristling Hydra, 4-mana 4/3. When the Hydra enters the battlefield, we gain 3 energy, and we can spend 3 energy to put a +1/+1 counter on the Hydra and give it hexproof until end of turn, so makes him for a nice safe target for our pump spells and our Fling if we have enough energy to keep up the hexproof shield. And of course, Bristling Hydra by itself is also a massive threat that's a headache for control decks to answer. Then quickly going over the mana base, of course we have 4 copies of Aether Hub, which gains an energy when it enters the battlefield, and we can spend an energy to make a color of any mana, otherwise it just makes colorless mana. We've got a bunch of basic lands, 3 forests and 4 mountains, along with 4 Hashep Oasis, which we can also use as a pump spell, which is very important in combination with the Pummeler of course. Then 4 copies of Rootbound Crag, and 4 copies of Sheltered Thicket, which enters the battlefield tapped, but we can cycle it for 2 mana. Then going over the sideboard, we have 4 copies of Harness Lightning for when we need access to a cheap removal spell. Works very well with our energy theme, since if we need to kill a smaller creature, we'll have some energy left over from the lightning. If we need to kill a bigger creature, we might have some energy spare that we can use in combination with the Harness Lightning to take down a larger creature. Next up we have 2 copies of Thrashing Brontodon, which can destroy artifacts and enchantments, and is also just a 3-mana 3/4 that can attack and block. Next up we have 3 copies of Lathnu Hellion, a 3-mana 4/4 with haste, gains 2 energy when it enters the battlefield, but at the end of turn we have to pay 2 energy to keep the Lathnu Hellion alive. But it's a nice threat against more controlling decks, where we can recover from a sweeper right away by playing this haste threat and keep attacking. Then we have 3 Aethersphere Harvesters, a 3-mana 3/5 vehicle with flying, only crew cost of 1, so we can even crew it with a servo token from the Aether Chaser if we wanted to, and gains 2 energy when it enters the battlefield, and we can spend an energy to give the Harvester lifelink until end of turn, so shines against aggro decks. And last but not least, 3 copies of a Glorybringer for when we need a bigger threat and maybe need to kill some additional creatures as well. 5-mana 4/4, flying haste, and we can exert it to deal 4 damage to a creature from the opponent. And of course also works nicely with the Rhonas, as it's a 4-powered creature by default that turns on Rhonas. And just a nice threat for when we need to go a little bit bigger and maybe not rely so much on the Electrostatic Pummeler. So that's the deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Alright, we're on the play, and this hand seems okay. Got some creatures, a pump spell, we've got our signature Electrostatic Pummeler. Probably going to lead with the Longtusk Cub here, but we'll see. Opponent with the Swamp. Against Swamp, maybe want to play out the Chaser first, just because if it eats a Fatal Push, we would rather have the Longtusk Cub survive. But given the 2 Pummelers, maybe we don't really care if they push the Cub. Yeah, I'm gonna still run out the Cub here. If they don't have the push, the upside's pretty high. Alright, they have the push. Black-white. Treasure map, so looks like a more controlling deck. Well, we get to resolve our Pummeler at least. Blossoming Defense is probably gonna be nice here. So starting next turn we can maybe keep it up. Opponent scries with Treasure map on upkeep. Alright, they're on an Esper deck. Resilient Khenra. So we could do some damage here with Khenra and Pummeler, but we only have 3 energy currently, so we can only double once. If we went for it and our opponent had no interaction, we could deal, let's see, 14 damage here, which is a lot, but not enough. I think we go with Khenra here. Pump the Pummeler, and just attack for 3. And that way we get to keep up Blossoming Defense. Opponent scries on upkeep. And Authority of the Consuls, okay. Opponent doesn't have a ton of interaction options left up here. And another Rampage, so if we go for it here, we can put the opponent to 1 life, which is not quite lethal. But then if the opponent follows up with, let's say, Fumigate, we're not in a great spot. So let's just attack for 3, and then play an Aether Chaser. And then we can maybe go for it next turn. And if they do have the Sweeper, we still have another Pummeler to follow up with, which will have 8 energy, which is enough to double twice. Opponent does transform the map. And they have an Arch over Aska as well. This looks like a Fumigate. Yep. Alright. Opponent back up to 18. but now we get to play Pummeler, still have Blossoming Defense up. And next turn we may be able to go for lethal. Ixalan's Binding, alright. So here we can Blossoming Defense to protect. Hope they don't have a counterspell. Alright, that works. Alright, Bristling Hydra is a nice one, but I think we just go for it here. So that's 5. We can double twice, so we don't even have to use the other Rampage here. Opponent's gonna sack a treasure. Double it. And double it. And that's 20. And that does it. Alright, sweet. So sideboarding against an Esper control deck. Probably want our Brontodons. Harvester is nice to dodge Fumigate effects. And our opponent had main deck Authority of the Consuls, so that makes me less interested in these haste creatures, since they probably also have some more in the sideboard, so they're definitely prepared for haste creatures. I think we keep in the defense given the Ixalan's Binding type effects. Maybe we don't want Servant of the Conduit, since it just dies to random Fumigates. Let's see, I guess we can shave an Aether Chaser as well, since the tokens also don't line up very well against Fumigates. Doesn't hit as hard as Voltaic Brawler, for example. This hand looks okay. No early play from the opponent. I think we just run out the Cub, and we're fine if they kill it with a push here. Same argument as earlier. If we can connect with the Cub, the upside's pretty high. And Gideon of the Trials, alright, that's a pretty good one here. Forces us to overextend into a potential sweeper effect. But Harvester is also a nice solution. And if our opponent uses Gideon on the Cub, we can just use the Cub to crew the Harvester if we want to. Baffling End on the Cub. And then Gideon can plus on the Harvester. That's okay. I think we just run out a Thrashing Brontodon, just to be more mana efficient. That way if we find another land we can run out 2 Brawlers. And a Vraska's Contempt, sure. Opponent's main phasing it to play around Blossoming Defense. Alright, so I think we just run it back, play another Brontodon here. And then hope to find a 4th land so we can double spell. Gideon keeps plussing on the Harvester. Alright, we did find a 4th land. So let's start by attacking Gideon, which I think is a big enough problem that it's worth dedicating some resources trying to kill it. And a Brontodon here is also pretty nice against a potential cellular wreckage, since we can always sacrifice it to kill the Baffling End to make a dino. And we only have 1 red source, so we can't actually play 2 spells. But our opponent doesn't know that, so they might let the first threat resolve here, out of fear for maybe a Longtusk Cub. So let's run out Voltaic Brawler. Alright, resolves. We'll say go. Opponent with an Aetherborn. Sure. So that's a pretty annoying threat, but Invigorated Rampage can still maybe push through the Aetherborn for some extra damage. So let's untap. Bristling Hydra is a nice one, so I definitely don't mind trading for the Aetherborn given the Hydra in our hand. Opponent does still have Cellular Wreckage mana up, but yeah, I think I like attacking with both on Gideon, and we're fine if they block, and I'm not going to use any pump spells. So here I just let damage happen. And then second main, we can still run out a Hydra if we want to, but I would rather play another Brawler here. Add some more energy, which is nice for when we go for the Pummeler. And this also plays a bit better around the potential Ixalan's Binding on the Brawler. Alright, opponent's gonna fire off Fumigate. So this is our window to resolve the Hydra. Alright, don't really have any other great plays available. Hope they don't have a counterspell as their last card. Alright, Hydra resolves with plenty of energy as protection. So now we have a way to kill Gideon potentially. Opponent keeps plussing on the Harvester, that's fine. And they're gonna activate the Arch to draw a card. And a treasure map, alright. So shields are down for the opponent. So we get to kill Gideon if we want to. I think we're for sure killing Gideon, and then we can add a Pummeler to the board, or we can play an Aether Chaser. Feels like we don't want to expose the Pummeler to Fumigate here, since with all the stored up energy, we can deal a lot of damage with the Pummeler. Let's just kill Gideon. And then play an Aether Chaser. I guess we could have tapped the Hashep Oasis there. Opponent's cries on upkeep. So this is the kind of spot where if our opponent taps out for maybe a Fumigate, and let's say we had a Fling in hand, we could play Pummeler, play a bunch of pump spells and Fling all in the same turn, and kill our opponent out of nowhere. So I think Fling deserves a spot here after sideboard. Now the question is, do we attack with the Harvester if our opponent represents Cellar Wreckage? We're gonna activate Arch once again. Shields are down for Cellar Wreckage, so it's pretty safe here to attack with the Harvester. So I think I like playing Aether Chaser to crew the Harvester and just attack for 9. Could pump the Hydra once, I suppose. That seems okay. Let's play Aether Chaser. Crew the Harvester. I'm not gonna make a token, but I will use the Hydra once. Get in for 10. And then second main, play a tapped Thicket. Even though we have a lot of mana already, we want to double red to have access to double Rampage. Opponent's gonna transform the treasure map. So by now they should have some decent cards in hand. I'm guessing their win condition is Approach of the Second Sun, but maybe it's something else. Another treasure map. Opponent's cries. Ixalan's Binding, alright. What's this gonna target? Probably the Harvester, yep, that'll work. Opponent does still represent Cellar Wreckage here with their treasure tokens. So we should still be a little bit cautious, but they do only have one card in hand. And starting next turn, the opponent's gonna start drawing extra cards with Treasure Cove. So if we can close out the game, we should try to consider doing so. So we've got 9 damage on the board. Can pump Hydra 3 times, make it 12, and then 1 Invigorated Rampage is enough. Or even better, we can play the Khenra to pump for 2 so we don't have to waste any energy. Pump the Hydra, which is the safest target. And then we can attack with everyone, and then use 1 Rampage. If they do have the Cellar Wreckage, we don't get to play Pummeler this turn as a follow-up. But I think it's worth it to try and go for the kill here. So I'm gonna Rampage, and I'll put everything on the Hydra. Have to pump the Hydra once to make it 16. And that does it. Sweet, managed to beat Esper Control. On to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw with a pretty slow hand. We have 2 4-drops, no early plays. But we do have all our mana, we have a pump spell, and we're pretty likely to draw a cheap creature before turn 4, so I think we'll keep. But there's definitely matchups where we can get punished if our opponent's playing, let's say, the mono-red deck. We could beat that before we get to cast the Hydra. So let's play the Mountain, Sego. Opponent started out with a Sheltered Thicket, so let's see what they are up to. Turn 2 Branchwalker, so they look to be the red-green monsters deck with Phoenixes and Glorybringers. Alright, Fling. Could be nice in combination with Rampage and Hydra, but we would have preferred to see a 2-drop creature here. Is it turn 3 Jade Light Ranger? Opponent's gonna attack first. We'll take it. And opponent just passes, alright. Longtusk Cub to draw, that's not bad. Let's play the Cup, keep up green representing Blossoming Defense. But the opponent likely still goes for a removal spell if they have one. But that's fine since we have Hydras coming up. And given that we don't have any energy already, our opponent could have actually abraded a Hydra in response to the trigger. So I actually don't mind our opponent using 3 damage removal spells like Abrade, since that means it's more likely that Hydra sticks around. So Samut to test it, interesting. Was expecting Rekindling Phoenix here, but Samut is actually going to be a problem given that we don't have any creatures in play to pressure Samut. So Branchwalker is double strike, but on the bright side we do get to resolve Hydra here. So let's play Aether Hub and then play the Hydra, which does a decent job of pressuring Samut. Captain Lannery Storm, alright. Gets double strike, so that can hit us for 6. if they sacrifice a treasure. Alright, then they just play defense. So we get to untap. If we Rampage plus Fling, we could deal 18 damage if our opponent doesn't block. So that's pretty impressive, but that also means we have to use the hexproof mode and our opponent can respond with a removal spell, which isn't a great idea. And I also don't see a reason to try and go for the kill now. I think what we want to do here is play an Aether Hub and then play a Bristling Hydra, keeping up Aether Hub, still representing Blossoming Defense. And then the 3 extra energy makes it so that we could potentially attack into the creatures from the opponent, since we kind of want to pressure Samut here. So that seems fine. And if our opponent has removal, we can just make sure to use the ability, let it resolve, and then use the second ability. I think we attack Samut, even though I wouldn't mind attacking our opponent here. We might just see a chump block, which is fine. Opponent just lets it happen. I'm not gonna sink any energy into the Hydra yet. So Samut is down to 2. Opponent might also be setting up maybe Glorybringer, give a double strike with Samut. Ooh, Majestic Miriarch instead. I see. Yeah, and that thing has haste, thanks to Captain Lannery Storm. Opponent can give a double strike with Samut. So I think we're just dead here. Yeah, that's unfortunate. So had we known about Miriarch, we definitely would have tried to kill Samut last turn. But as it turns out, our opponent can kill us if they attack with everyone. So we can block Captain Lannery Storm, but still end up taking exactly 14. So yeah, missing that early creature and the sneaky attacks from the Branchwalker were enough for the opponent to kill us here. Alright, at least now we have a better idea what the opponent is up to. So how do we want to sideboard against this particular opponent? I think the Harness Lightnings have to come in, and the Glorybringers as well, just to be able to answer the opponent's creatures. Harvester can be okay against an opposing Planeswalker since it's a flying threat. If our opponent has Glorybringers, it can also block those, so it's a reasonable card, but we haven't seen any Glorybringers yet. So if we're kind of morphing into more of a mid-range deck, the Pummelers definitely lose some value. What if we just take all these cards out? Then we still need to make 4 cuts. So I could see just taking out all the Pummelers and just abandoning the Pummeler plan, morph into more of a mid-range deck with good creatures, some removal, and then Rhonas is pretty nice here now that we bring in the Glorybringer. Yeah, this might be okay. The other argument is to just go all in on the Pummelers and then try to get them with Rampage plus Fling, which is also a reasonable plan, but I assume our opponent will have brought in more interaction for the Pummeler, so I think we want to switch it up. This hand, unfortunately, is not a keep. Alright, so this one we can keep. We've got a decent curve here, if we can find lands number 4 and 5. Servant will keep, since that's acceleration. So let's lead with Crag, say go. Turn 2, it's actually interesting what we play, since we don't have a 4-drop to ramp into currently, so I think I like playing the Cub. And then if our opponent plays a random Branchwalker and it doesn't get a +1/+1 counter, we can play Servant, which makes the Cub into a virtual 3/3, letting it maybe connect and start accumulating some energy. Alright, opponent's just gonna Braid right away, that's fine. Alright, Harvester. But I think we still play the Servant here, since if we draw land, we can Glorybringer next turn. Alright, did not draw the land, so let's attack for 2. And then I'm gonna play a Harvester. What I didn't consider is that our opponent's playing a Braid, so Harvester might not be the best card. Well, at least our opponent's missing some land drops. So we have some time to set up here, and Hydra is a nice draw. A few options available. We can play Rhonas, Crew Harvester, attack for 5, and then next turn play Hydra, so we can attack with Rhonas. That seems okay. So let's play Rhonas. The other option was just playing the Hydra right now, but our opponent hasn't shown us any removal for the Servant of the Conduit yet, so I'm assuming that they don't have any. Not gonna give anything a lifelink here. Alright, our opponent found their 3rd land, so we might still have a game. And it's gonna be Jadelight Ranger to help them find more lands. Opponent reveals Glorybringer, puts it in the graveyard, and reveals Merfolk Branchwalker, which they also put in the graveyard since they're looking for lands. Alright, this worked out. Did not find a land, so we don't get to quite crush our opponent, but this is still a pretty nice play. Play a Hydra, which can crew the Harvester, and then Rhonas can also attack. And our opponent's now pretty far behind on board, and they scoop it up. Alright, so on to game 3. Do we want to change anything? Maybe reconsider the Harvesters now that we saw the Abrade yet again. But the Pummeler isn't much better in that spot. Could also go for the Hellions. Try apply more pressure that way. They do kind of line up nicely against Abrade. So I could see that change, make Rhonas even better. Kind of want a second copy now. So yeah, this sounds okay. A nice mix of creatures removal, Glorybringer as a top end. And Rhonas, nice. So if we can just hit land number 4 and 5 to get up to Glorybringer, we should be good to go. Opponent with a slow start with double tap land, and there's land number 4, so we are well on our way to Glorybringer. Play Aether Chaser, say go. Opponent with a Magma Spray on the Chaser, that's okay. Does make it so we can't maybe pump the Chaser to attack with Rhonas if we fail on finding a 5th land, but Brawler is a nice substitute. So I think we just run out Brawler, keep up green mana, and then next turn we can play Rhonas, keep up green mana, and then hopefully Glorybringer. So the question is, do we protect the Brawler if our opponent tries to kill it here? Don't know the answer to that. Think we just let it happen, hold on to the Blossoming Defense to maybe protect the Glorybringer or another creature down the line. Alright, kind of regretting that decision now, but Rhonas is still pretty decent here if we can enable it. And we're not really in a hurry given the harness lining. We do have some interaction for the opponent's creatures as well. Alright, Cub is a pretty nice draw here, so we can play Cub, keeping up as much green mana as possible. We can pump it twice and then attack with Rhonas, and then we still have double Blossoming Defense up to protect the Cub. So that was a nice draw. Another trick we can do with the Cub is use Harness Lining, targeting one of our own creatures just to gain 3 energy to be able to pump the Cub. Opponent with a Samut, Voice of Dissent end of turn. Think we let that resolve and then kill it with Harness Lining. That seems pretty safe here. Then we don't have Blossoming Defense up, but I don't want our opponent to untap with Samut. So yeah, let's try and kill it here. We do go down to 0 energy, but I think that's okay. And now that the Cub is a 4/4, there's not too many removal spells that just straight up kill it besides Glorybringer. So this is unfortunate. And a tap land means we can't attack our opponent back with our Glorybringer, but on the bright side their Glorybringer is exerted, so it won't be attacking us for another turn. And Glorybringers can't kill each other since it's non-dragon. Don't have to be afraid of the opponent's Glorybringer killing our Glorybringer. But they might have a second one. Another Samut instead. Yeah, this is gonna hurt. So this deals 6, puts us to 10. Harness Lining the pickup. Harness Lining can't even kill the 4 toughness creatures here. Let's play our own Glorybringer. And exert. And that can kill Samuts. And hope that we don't die on the way back. Opponent is at 6, a second Glorybringer doesn't do it, Muriark would just be a 4/4 with haste, so that doesn't do it either. And yep, there's a second Glorybringer. Opponent attacks with both, so now they're just dead to Blossoming Defense, pumping the Rhonas. Alright, Blossoming Defense, and that should prompt a concession. We even had the 2nd and 3rd copies. Maybe should have used one earlier, maybe to protect the Voltaic Brawler. Another thing we could have done different there is instead of killing the Samut end of turn, wait for them to maybe play something like a Glorybringer to kill that with our Harness Lining instead. But we were kind of playing around our opponent, maybe having their own copies of Blossoming Defense, which is certainly reasonable for them to have. So on to the next one. Alright, we're on the play, and this hand seems okay. We've got a turn 3 Hydra if the Servant survives, which is a nice place to start. So let us lead with a tapped Crag, say go. Turn 1 Swamp, so they could have a Fatal Push here for the Servant, but that's fine. So we're already up to 3 energy, which means that if we play the Hydra, our opponent cannot respond to the energy trigger by killing the Hydra, since we'll be able to give it hexproof right away. So next turn we'll just play another Servant. This time we can keep up Blossoming Defense. Opponent on black-green. And turn to Glintsleeve Siphoner. That's annoying since we don't have removal for it. But at least they won't be drawing a card right away. So I guess we just play Servant and play this tapped Rootbound Crag, since I don't really need to keep a Blossoming Defense to protect Servant here. A tapped Foul Orchard. And Winding Constrictor, that's not what we want to see here. So I think this is going to be the type of game where we need to try and sneak in as much damage as possible. So I'm going to attack with the Servants in the hopes that they don't block, so we can still play Hydra second main. Alright, they take it. And now we can still play a Hydra. So our opponent draws an extra card. And if our opponent has their own Hydra, we could also be in trouble, since with Winding Constrictor they can make it very large very quickly. And our best hope is to find something like an Electrostatic Pummeler, or just an effect to maybe give our creatures trample. Rhonas would be very good. Opponent with a Rishkar, that's not bad. Doubles up the counters, and our opponent also splashing blue for the Hadana's Climb here, which is also going to be difficult to beat if the opponent has it. Still don't think the Constrictor can attack here, since we can just triple pump or Hydra if we want to. So just the Siphoner getting in. So I think we just run out another Hydra. And then attack with the first one. Opponent takes it. I think we pump the Hydra once here. 5 puts them to 12. And then keep triple activation on the Hydra on defense, as well as Blossoming Defense. Opponent draws another extra card. So don't want to see Hadana's Climb. Opponent with Fatal Push on Servant. We could Blossoming Defense to prevent the Siphoner from attacking, but I don't think we want to do that here. And alright, our opponent does have the Hadana's Climb. At least they won't be able to give anything flying this turn, but next turn we should be in a lot of trouble. So the Siphoner is now 6 powered. So we'll go down to 8. So I guess our best bet is drawing into Invigorated Rampage or Fling. A Longtusk Cub instead. Don't think that's gonna do it, so let us sacrifice Hashep Oasis on one of the Hydras. And then attack with both. Opponent can just jump with Rishkar. So what we want them to do here is take a potential Harness Lining into consideration on their Glintsleeve Siphoner next turn. Since if we have a Harness Lining, we could technically still survive for a turn, but our opponent's just going for a double jump to play it safe. So here we just bump the Hydra once, and then let damage happen. Opponent maybe also playing around just Invigorated Rampage, dealing extra trample damage. So yeah, this is a spot where if we had a Harness Lining, we would be able to stabilize, but the Siphoner is now just going to be able to kill us. Siphoner attacks, and our opponent just needs to use the Winged Temple. Opponent could also have a Blossoming Defense as backup, so Harness Lining might not even be good enough. Alright, they're activating the Winged Temple, and we will concede. Alright, so on to sideboarding. So this is definitely a matchup where we want to bring in the Harness Linings to answer problematic creatures like Winding Constrictor and the Glintsleeve Siphoner, and then Glorybringer as well. Could bring in the Brontodon to answer Hadana's Climb. Don't know if that's maybe too narrow. I think we have to keep in Blossoming Defense since our opponent has Vraska's Contempt, and having a 1-mana counterspell is pretty appealing. Fling could be good if our opponent brings in a bunch of Death Touch creatures. Maybe on the play we don't want to bring in these removal cards and just try to stay as focused as possible, but then on the draw we want to switch it up and bring in these cards. That could be reasonable. Maybe Harness Lining is better than, let's say, an Aether Chaser. Cut all the Aether Chasers in favor of Servants. I'll try this. Alright, would like to be on the play. And yeah, this hand's okay. Especially for opponent doesn't have answers to the Pummeler. Could see Glorybringer being okay in this matchup, but it does line up pretty poorly against opposing Bristling Hydras. And 5 mana is also pretty expensive. Opponent might have their own Blossoming Defenses. It's definitely a tricky balance here. And if we want to stay as focused as possible to exploit Pummeler, then don't really have room for the Glorybringer. So play a turn 2 Servants. Turn 3 Pummeler, turn 4 Pummeler, and then try to set up for a win. Opponent with the turn 2 Siphoner. Alright, at least we can attack into that with the Servant, unlike Winding Constrictor. So, yeah, let's get in for 2. Could play Aether Hub, but that kind of shows we have an extra Pummeler activation, so I'm gonna play the Hashep Oasis instead. And if we draw another Aether Hub, I don't think it matters that we miss out on 1 energy. The difference between 5 energy and 6 energy is pretty relevant, so not showing the opponent that we have the 6th energy can be in our favor here. Glint Sleeve attacks, we'll take 2, and hope that they don't have removal for the Pummeler. Fatal Push doesn't work unless they have Revolt somehow. And Vraska's Contempt is 4 mana. Alright, another Siphoner. So our opponent is pretty much tapped out. They could still have a Blossoming Defense to pump their Siphoner, but that's it. So we can just deal 20 damage here. Alright, we did actually draw another Aether Hub. So can play another Pummeler as well to pump even more. But we can also just attack with both and then attack for 20. So yeah, let's just attack. Opponent doesn't even block. Give this +4. And then double activate, and that's 20. Alright, so on to a game 3 here against Sultai. Do we reconsider Glorybringer? I don't think we do. I think the games we win are gonna look pretty much like game 2 there, where we have Pummeler, opponent doesn't kill it, and we try to win with a Pump Spell. And I still like Harness Lining over Chaser there, since it can interact, and worst case we can just make 3 energy. This hand I don't think we can keep. Our only creatures are 4 drops, and double Aether Hub can also be awkward, so let's go to 6. Alright, this hand's not much better. 1 lander, only Aether Hub, but we do have both Pummeler and Hydra, and a Rampage as well, which is pretty key. So I think we keep, and then hope to scry into some lands. Alright, I'll keep the Aether Hub. It's not pretty, but at least it's land that allows us to play Magic. So not even sure that we want to play the Brawler on turn 2 here, since wouldn't net us any energy. But maybe it's still fine to put a 3-2 out there. Blossoming Defense. Alright, I think we just make a 3-2. Our opponent also mulligans, so it could be that they have a weaker hand, where a 3-2 can still get there. And then hope to draw into some other lands next turn. We saw the upside of Aether Hub in game 2, where the extra energy let us activate Pummeler once more. Kind of seeing the downside in this game, where if it's your only land, it ends up wasting some energy. Opponent with Servant on turn 3, keeping up black mana for maybe Fatal Push. Alright, Hashep Oasis is a nice draw. So I think we just attack and offer the trade. I'm fine just trading Brawler for Servant here. Don't want to waste any energy. Opponent just takes it. And I'll play another Brawler. Don't want to expose the Pummeler to Vraska's Contempt when we have the Blossoming Defense in hand to protect it. So this Brawler netted us 1 energy, which is nice. If we can find another colored land, we may be able to either play Pummeler plus keep up defense, or just play the Hydra. There's the Rishkar, alright. So our opponent definitely doesn't have any mana problems. And they likely don't have a Constrictor, otherwise they would have played that first. So their hand could still have cards like Fatal Push, Vraska's Contempt, maybe Hadana's Climb. And our opponent is just playing defense here, which is okay. And Hashep Oasis is a nice draw. So I think we just attack with both Brawlers. I'm okay trading. And second main phase we'll have to decide if we want to go with the Pummeler or the Hydra. Alright, opponent just takes 6. Feels like we just want to play the Hydra here, since we still have the energy to protect from a potential removal spell. And this gives us a nice energy boost as well. And we might also just be able to kill with Hydra. Just going Rampage plus defense adds a lot of damage. And our opponent just says go, so they might be flooding out a bit. Another Rampage is nice. I think we just attack with everyone, see what happens. And still not gonna use the Brawlers here. So can definitely expect a Vraska's Contempt here from the opponent. Rishkar in front of Bristling Hydra. Servant in front of Brawler. So let's see, we could actually give the Hydra +8 power and trample. although that would cost us 2 energy, so we'd only be able to pump the Hydra once. So I think we just pump the Hydra once, so that this trade goes in our favor, and then see what happens. Alright, that worked. And then second main, I think we run out the Pummeler. Still keeping up Blossoming Defense, which is pretty important here. And then just a 3 energy by itself is a big deal. Opponent does have Ifnir Deadlands to maybe shrink down a Pummeler, but they are out of black mana now that the Servant died. So they'll need an untapped black source to be able to use the Deadlands. Definitely liking our chances here. Opponent does have a black producing a land, but it comes into play tapped, so Ifnir Deadlands isn't an option. Fatal Push on Pummeler, but they don't have Revolt enabled, so sure. Maybe our opponent was tricking us into using a Blossoming Defense there. Opponent scoops it up, revealing a hand of Fatal Push and Botanical Sanctum, so not the best cards in this situation. Maybe our opponent could have tried to Fatal Push the Pummeler end of turn, when Revolt got enabled from the Servant and the Rishkar dying, but then the Hydra was still going to be able to kill them. Alright, so I want to thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed this gameplay, and as always, have a nice day. I also want to thank all my patrons for supporting the channel, and you can do so yourself as well over at patreon.com/LegenVD, where you get cool rewards for supporting the channel, as well as getting us closer to our goals, where with every goal reached we will release an additional weekly series, so if you want to see more content, Patreon is the place to go.